Hello and welcome to Living Proof, the Isaac Newton Institute podcast produced in collaboration with plus.maths.org. I'm Rachel Thomas.
And I'm Marianne Freiberger. One of the things the Newton Institute is famous for is bringing together researchers from around the world for long research programs. It's an opportunity for old friends and colleagues to meet new friends and colleagues as they work together at the INI over a period of weeks or even months. The luxury of time and the opportunity to connect over seminars and over coffee and lunch has created many exciting collaborations and new research.
And recently at the Operators, Groups and Graphs program that finished up in December last year, it wasn't just an opportunity for old friends to come together to work on new mathematics. It provided an opportunity for a family of visiting mathematicians to work together for the very first time. So that was Yuri Bader, who's a professor of mathematics at the Weizmann Institute of Science and at the University of Maryland, who has a long-standing friendship and many collaborations with Roman Sauer, who's a professor at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. And Marianne, you recently met Yuri and Roman, along with Yuri's children, Saar and Shaked Bader.
Yeah, I did. And Saar, who's just finished his master's in mathematics, and Shaked, who's a PhD student at the University of Oxford, they also attended the program at the Newton Institute. And during the time the four of them were together, they had the opportunity to work on a joint piece of research for the first time. It was great to talk to them all about how maths can keep you on the edge of your seat, what it's like to be part of a mathematical family and friendship, and how their recent joint research illustrates the egalitarian nature of maths. I started off by asking them to introduce themselves, starting with Roman.
Okay, so my name is Roman Sauer. I'm based in Karlsruhe in Germany at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. I try to think of myself as a mid-career researcher. I don't know whether this is still true. I come somehow from a slightly maybe different background than Uri, with whom I worked for many years now.
I'm Uri Bader. Currently, I have positions, professor positions, both in the Weizmann Institute in Israel and in the University of Maryland, United States. I spent some years in Chicago, and then we met Roman, and that really affected my mathematical life, because since then we are collaborating for a long time, and also my personal life, because Saar was born there, Shaked was there as a little kid.
Okay, all right, well, let's move on to Saar then.
I have a master's. I'm currently not in academia. I'm planning to do a PhD later on.
Okay, and Shaked, you?
I'm doing my PhD in the University of Oxford now. I'm in my third year.
So how are you three Baders? How are you related? You're the dad, right, Yuri?
I am, yes.
Okay.
And the other kids.
Yeah.
And how do you have any other siblings?
Yeah, we have two more.
And do they also do maths?
No.
Okay, so what is it about you? I mean, how did you come to mathematics? Was it always clear to you due to the inspiration that you got in your family, or is it something that happened later on that you developed an interest in it?
I think I always had an interest in mathematics, but not just in mathematics. And what happened is that around when I was 16, I didn't want to go to school anymore, and I told my dad, and he said, okay, that's fine. What do you want to do? And it sounded as if I could do anything, but actually I think I probably felt there's some expectation that I will do something valuable with my time. And I said I could study in the university. And he asked me what. And I looked at all the courses. I narrowed it down to neuroscience or mathematics. And my dad trickily convinced me that if I do an undergrad in mathematics, I could do a master's in neuroscience, and it's harder in the other way. That is correct. I'm not objecting that fact. I am objecting the fact that after you do an undergrad in mathematics, you just can't study other things. mathematics has a very specific way they teach you where you need to sit on the edge of your chair while you're listening to talks and other things after that. Just physically being in a talk is boring. It's not that the material is boring, but it's such a different way of teaching.
And why is that, do you think? I mean, what is it about the mathematics that keeps you more on the edge of your seat?
Maybe because when you listen to a talk, you don't get much from the content. Like the content is some theorem, and I will probably not use that theorem, but I do get much from understanding how a proof works. And so the only way you could study is by understanding how one thinks, and for that you'll need to think.
So maybe, may I interrupt? I'm trying to interpret what Shaked just said. I think maybe in mathematical talk, you always processing yourself. You're following, when you follow a proof of a theorem, you are making something you are actively follow the thinking process. And it's maybe a bit different in other subjects that you are just following, you're absorbing. Here you're actually processing yourself something. And this is presumably my interpretation of what Shaked says. This is addictive. Having anything otherwise now becomes a bit boring.
Yeah.
Yes, because you are right. You are actively involved because you have to think so hard to follow. And then it is a bit like you're on the edge of your seat because you're waiting for the next, the next kind of line in the proof or something. So yeah. So Saar, what about you? How did you come to mathematics?
So from a very young age, my dad taught me mathematics, like modular arithmetic and more advanced things, calculus, linear algebra, and so on. And I just knew that I want to do that. I want to
So
learn.
it was always kind of clear to you that that's what you
Yeah.
wanted to do.
I'm extremely proud of my kids. Actually, I'm proud of the four of them, not only these two. They made their choice, which is fantastic. I'm a bit terrified by this choice because this is it's a responsibility of myself now, that kind of following me, but they do it anyway in a sense. So I respect their choices, and it's a thrill to be able to discuss with them and to share with them also my professional life.
And then, so you said earlier that when you were in Chicago, you met Roman.
Yeah, that's right. So our families know each other for a very long time, actually. So also my kids, I knew Saar and Shaked back then when Saar was newborn and Shaked was still small, and watching over my kids, which were also babies at this time. So we know each other for a very long time, but it's of course very interesting now to interact with Saar and Shaked as mathematicians and not just as friends of the family.
So have you, as a family, and you, Roman, included as a friend of the family kind of thing, have you worked a lot together before?
Well, I worked a lot with Uri on, we had several projects before. As Uri said, we're working on and off since the Chicago time. But with Saar and Shaked, I taught mathematics with Shaked. She is a PhD student. She attended conferences I attended, so we talked maybe from time to time a bit of math, but we never, of course, worked on anything as detailed as this project together. So this is a new experience. And as Uri said, and then also Shaked said, the fascinating thing about mathematics is, well, you have to think, but you can also think everything through, which means you don't decide anything by authority, right? So you're always at the same level, even though Uri and I are much older and in some way more experienced, but still we're all like, if you have a new project, if you have a new questions, you feel like you have to think it through, and your advantage as an older mathematician is not that great, actually. We all have to think, and we're all somehow on the same, interact on the same level. So it's an egalitarian science in some sense, right?
So the four of them came together at the Newton Institute, and in their joint work, they were bringing together ideas from different parts of mathematics.
Yeah, that's right. And one of those parts was topology. That's the study of the nature of shapes. And as Roman explains, in topology, you only care about this in a qualitative sense. Two shapes are topologically the same if you can deform one into the other without cutting or tearing, but you are allowed to deform them a bit.
That's right. And there's a way you can capture the sort of essential nature of an object's shape using sort of algebraic descriptions in an approach called algebraic topology.
Yeah, and here's Roman explaining more.
Before we go to algebraic topology, maybe a word about topology, which is the subject where you study spaces, geometric objects, but you study them from a purely qualitative point of view instead of a quantitative point of view, as in geometry. In geometry, you ask what is the volume of something, for example. That's a question you wouldn't ask in topology, but you would ask how can you deform this object, or what are the unique features of an object up to deformation. So it's a very rough point of view of looking at an object. And then in algebraic topology, we kind of invent all kinds of algebraic invariants for these kind of objects because they're usually very complicated. And if they're very high dimensional, then you don't have like a direct geometric intuition of what's going on. You cannot just look at them in any direct way. So in some sense, we're inventing all these algebraic invariants, and we look at these objects through these algebraic invariants in a very indirect way, trying to capture their essence somehow. So this is what algebraic topology is about.
Now we can connect topology to another area of maths called group theory. A group is a mathematical object that appears really everywhere in mathematics. Groups arose to describe collections of actions that you could do to an object, and you can do one action after another, and each action can also be reversed.
So groups started off as a way to study symmetries of objects, like the rotational symmetries of an equilateral triangle. You can rotate a triangle by 1/3 of a circle, by 2/3 of a circle, or all the way around in a full rotation, which is like leaving it unchanged. And you can perform one of these rotational symmetries after another. And you can also undo an action. So if you rotate the triangle by 1/3 of a turn, you can then rotate it again by 2/3 of a turn and get back into the original position.
Yeah, so groups first came up as a way of studying symmetries, but you can also describe a group sort of abstractly, and then it can be useful in all sorts of other mathematical areas. In topology, you can start with some sort of a shape or a space, and you can use something called the fundamental group of the space to describe important information about the topology of the space. But you can also go the other way around. You can start with a group and associate to it a topological space or object. Here's Roman again.
We can associate a topological space or a geometric object to that group, and then we can study invariants of that space coming from algebraic topology. And these invariants then become invariants of the groups. And in some sense, this is what we also do here in this project.
You can think of this link between groups and topological spaces like the link between our example of a group of rotational symmetries and the object, the equilateral triangle. The way this symmetry group, made up of these rotational symmetries, act on the space on the triangle tells us something about the space itself. And this correspondence between spaces and groups is also very useful as it can go the other way around as well. Knowing what kind of spaces a group can act on can tell you something about the group.
Yes. And for some groups acting on topological spaces, there's a particular property called property T, which means that the group is rigid in some mathematical sense that we won't really need to go into here. Now, Roman and Yuri had been working on something called higher property T, which generalizes this idea to higher dimensions.
And Marianne, you said that Saar and Shaka were in the meantime, they were thinking about trees, which brings us to another element involved in this research program at the INI. Trees are a special kind of graph. A graph is a collection of nodes joined by edges, and a tree is a graph like you'd imagine a tree to be. It has no edges connecting together to make a loop. So, as well as thinking of a tree as a graph, you can also imagine it as a very particular type of space, sort of a collection of one-dimensional lines in space, the edges of the tree that are connected together. And Saar and Shaka were interested in kind of higher dimensional generalizations of trees.
Yeah, it was known that groups with property T couldn't act meaningfully on trees. And this gave Saar and Shakit an idea that Roman and their dad's work on higher property T might help. Here's Shakit again.
So you have, as Roman said, you can take groups and you can have them act on a space. So what does it mean for a group to act on a space? You just think of each element of the group as doing a symmetry of the space. And if all my symmetries fix the same point, I can't actually get information about the group from the space. And it was a known result that groups with property T cannot act on trees. So each time they will act on a tree, there will be a common fixed point. And Uri and Roman developed something called higher property T, and they studied it. And Saar then asked if groups with higher property T can act on higher versions of trees. And he asked me this question because I'm his sister and he loves me. And because in my master's, I studied the two-dimensional version of trees. And then we try to understand, and when you develop higher property or generally new notions, maybe you don't have the right definition yet. So for which generalization of T is the right generalization for higher property T? And it occurred to us that for this question, the generalization that Uri and Roman were currently working or were then working with was not exactly the generalization we need. So then we needed them to help generalize higher property T in the correct way, in a sense.
The four of them started working together, and they ended up proving a rigidity result about whether groups that act as symmetries on a higher dimensional space can also act as symmetries on some lower dimensional space. If you can make your higher dimensional space simpler in some way while still allowing the group to act as a symmetry group on it, or if there is some sort of rigidity that stops you. Here's Saar again.
What is this rigidity? So if you have, for example, you have a group which is in some natural sense, it's a group of symmetries of an n-dimensional space. So one can ask, can this group, which is naturally, so again, it's naturally the group of symmetries of an n-dimensional space, can you see it as symmetries of some simple space of a space of smaller dimension? So the rigidity that we proved says that in some cases that you can't. There is no natural and interesting way to see it as symmetries of smaller dimensional space.
So we have these four mathematicians, three of them related, one of them a family friend, but they span different generations and they came together, each bringing their own approaches to work together on this problem.
So they came up with a strategy of attacking this question of rigidity using based on the tool that with Roman we provide. Saar and Shaked came up with a strategy they started working on it, and I was fascinated, but I was watching from a side. I didn't want to interrupt. But then after a while, they realized that they can actually finish they can solve the problem, but not based on the work we have done with Roman in the past, but they they needed a bit of a generalization of our work, of my work with Roman. They actually were able to come up with an explicit question, an explicit variant of our work that we should have reproved now. And these forms, I mean, then they invited myself and Roman into their joint work, and we started working together.
It's not really surprising that things like this happen at the Newton Institute. They make this opportunity to bring people together and give them the time and space to work on ideas that arise really at the interfaces of mathematical areas.
Yeah, and as Roman explains, the program exploring the interfaces of operators, groups, and graphs provided the ideal opportunity for these four to work together. Here's Roman again.
The beginning of the project was actually before the Newton Institute program. But I would say that the program at the Newton Institute was a great catalyst for the project, because the program was really it was really on this subject and its ramifications, and we got asked many questions. We had a lot of inspirations, also lots of discussions with members of the program that clarified certain aspects of this work.
So you arrived with a sort of project that was already running, and then the program helped you to interact with others and to get input and to kind of develop it. So were you all four physically there at the Newton Institute?
Only for 1 week.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Roman and I were there for the entire semester.
But this program was an opportunity for us, the four of us, to get together. It was the first time that we were together in the same room. And
the first and only.
We actually didn't have a lot of 4 people conversations before. The project started with Saar and me talking. Saar came up with the question. Saar and I started talking. Saar and my dad started talking a lot. My dad and Roman, a lot of pairs. Roman and I met when Roman came to the satellite conference of the program in Oxford. And we had maybe 2 or 3 meetings, the 4 of us on Zoom. And then we had many meetings during the conference week that the 4 of us were there.
And what was it like? Saar, what did you find? How did you find the Newton Institute? How did you find being there?
It's a great place. It's a great environment to do math, to learn math.
What do you like about it?
So I'm currently not doing math every day. So when I was there, so it was like a full week of just math, and it really helped me to be like I lived the math during this week.
So it's the immersive thing, right? Like an immersive mathematical experience. And had any of you been there before?
I've been there before. I think it was 2017. Not 100% sure now. Yeah, but I've been there for, I think, 2.5 weeks only before, and this is the first time I stayed there for over 3 months, 3.5 months.
I was there before, and actually it was the venue where I gave my first mathematical lecture when I was a PhD student. Actually, in the beginning of my PhD students, yeah, I was lecturing on my master's. I can look it up. I think it was 2000. It was
yeah, it must have been 26 years ago.
So we always really enjoy the atmosphere at the Newton Institute. It's unlike other conferences and meetings. We sort of joke that it seems more like a holiday or a holiday camp even for mathematicians and their families than work. And that experience of coming often with your family to immerse yourself in the space for several months sort of allows these serendipitous conversations and interactions that give the perfect conditions for collaborations like this to arise.
The Newton Institute is, first of all, they have this house, right? There's a house where all the researchers are sitting. So for me, it's a little bit, it's like in your dream department. of mathematics, which is like they are temporarily for 3 months. And you have all these colleagues with whom you interact, usually during conferences, and they're there around the corner. So I enjoyed that tremendously. And I was there with my family, or with part of my family, with my youngest kid and my wife, and she went to school there, and she also enjoyed it. So I mean, that of course contributed to the enjoyment um, of myself. That also my daughter liked it very much there. Um, so yeah, it was a great experience. Yeah, because my feeling is it's very hard when you go to such a program and you want to work with somebody, say, and but you haven't any idea yet. I mean, it takes some time to develop, right? But when you're there for 3 months, you have enough time that certain things just happen by accident. You have a conversation, maybe not with a specific project in mind, but somehow by talking to these people, something comes up. And that's my experience normally, that something comes up after a while, but it takes time, and it's the chance of these long-term programs that last several months that something can actually emerge there much more easily than during a 1 week conference, say.
That was Roman Sauer, and thanks to him and to Yuri, Shakit, and Saar Bada for talking to us about their experience working together. That's it for today's podcast. If you've enjoyed listening, then please recommend us to a friend, or rate or review the podcast wherever you're listening. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.
Bye.